So before we begin, I want to give just a little intro to Jay. He's at Middlebury now, right? That's pretty exciting. Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so he has actually written a book. He's the author of a book called Blue Mind. And if you have not read that and would like to definitely read that, which I encourage you to do, he does have it available at his table right outside, which I'm sure he'd be happy to sign for you as well at some point. So make sure that you go and check out J.'s table and talk to him a little bit more about his book. But today J is changing the world. He engages with water and rethinking all the ways people spend their time near, in, on, or under it. In a world of increasing anxiety, distraction, and disconnection, whales and dolphins are therapy for those that need them the most and everybody else. Learn how the ocean, water, and wildlife's cognitive, emotional, social, physical, spiritual benefits can build a more diverse Blue Mind movement and help fix what's broken in nature and our world. Please welcome J. Nichols. Oh, of course. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the very nice. I'm good.
You got the mic?
Yep, mic is good. Sound all right? I'm out there. So first and most important question, does everybody have a marble? Actually, probably a better way to ask that question would be, raise your hand if you don't have a marble. Well done, marble team. You did a great job. Everybody's got one. So let's just make sure anyone who comes in a little late gets to grab their marble. And hang on to that. Don't put it away yet, because you're going to need it shortly as part of an interactive activity. So I've been really looking forward to this talk. I get to speak a lot about the ocean and ocean wildlife and water in various venues, and this is the talk I've been looking forward to the most this year. And it's good to see some friends, some old friends, and some new friends, and some people that I've been in touch with about Blue Mind but haven't met. And a friend of mine, Greg, ran into a young woman who is attending. Greg works at Esalen, and I guess he was out having a glass of wine and he was chatting with his wine-drinking neighbors and met them and started talking about the ocean, and he came around to Blue Mind. And what is your name? Fawn had a copy of Blue Mind and came to Whalefest to join us here. And my friend Brenda is here, and we go way back, and I will share a little story about our connection shortly. So this is kind of a provocative title, Whales Are Medicine, and I gave a talk at a big sea turtle meeting a couple years ago, and the title was Sea Turtles Are Medicine. I think it shook some people up. They kind of thought I meant, the consumptive kind of medicine, the oil, the various products that have traditionally been made from turtle and used medicinally. That is not, in fact, what I'm referring to here. A different kind of medicine, but very much in the biological sense. So that'll make more sense by the time we split up here today. If you want any follow-up, if you want any of a PDF of the research, you just want to ask a question, if you want me to send you this whole slide deck, or really any question that pops up, I love to be helpful and useful. So my contact information is right there. The best way to capture anything like that is to do what you're doing there. Just take a photo of the screen, and you don't even have to write anything down until later. And so social media, email, the website, I even use the telephone. I know how old-fashioned that sounds, but I do. So how many people have seen something like this, maybe from the bow of a boat, whether it was a wind-powered boat or an engine-powered boat or a kayak or maybe even a ship? Put your hands way up if you've seen something like that. Well, pretty majority of the group. If you're ever on a boat in the dolphins bow ride, pretty much everybody moves to the bow. Hopefully not the captain, everybody else moves to the bow. Hopefully the captain's still steering, and everybody's happy. And we don't want it to end. And then the dolphins decide, yeah, that's enough. And then they somehow disappear. They go deep, they pop up, and then they're gone, and the fun is over. But that feeling carries with us. And it's one, as a marine biologist, it's one of the reasons I do what I do. I fell in love with that feeling at a very young age, and I said, I want to keep that feeling going as much as possible. Pro surfer was not an option. Marine biologist was available. I remember everybody said, Jacques Cousteau already has that job, so there's no chance, it's taken. That was the olden days, 40-ish years ago. But I followed my dream and my passion to become a marine biologist because of that feeling. How many people have seen something that looks like this? Right. Whether it was on the screen right now or actually with your own two eyes out on the water. That's a familiar sight if you're ever out on the water and the whales come by. If you're a little bit more lucky, perhaps the show gets a little bit bigger and wetter, and the screams get louder. And those screams are positive emotional responses to wildlife, to nature. And then if you really kind of hit the jackpot as far as whales go, you might have seen something like this. And so this weekend, and in fact all of these whale conferences, we learn a lot about whale behavior. We learn a lot about education. We learn a lot about ecology and migration. It's just all very important. But I want to shift and kind of take a slightly, oh, wait, here's another one. See if this comes through. Whoops. Is that, hear that? We got our audio on there? Oh, why? All right, well, there's this album I worked on called Pod Tune, and we asked a group of musicians to take some whale songs, and each of them composed a song. And if you can use your imagination, you'll hear it in your mind right now. Not sure why it's not playing. I'll see if it goes this time. All right. Well, the emotional response to nature, including the sight and sounds of nature around us, especially when we're there in person, changes us biologically. I'm going to show you a quick 1-minute trailer to a series of films that we did on Blue Mind. The best way to understand Blue Mind is to first understand Red Mind. We're anxious, we're stressed, and that takes its toll. You're going to break down, you're going to fall apart. That's where Blue Mind comes in. Water is really the basis of life. We are all made of mostly water. We all spent the first 9 months of our lives swimming around in this dark watery pool called our mother. You need water to survive, but you also need water to thrive. Getting us more towards a Blue Mind state is really important for our personal health, for the health of our families, of our communities, and even our country. We get so much from the waters of the world, and we have so much we can give back. And when that connection starts to flow, amazing things can happen. So this idea of Blue Mind that I think pretty much everybody in the room has experienced, that emotional response to being near, in, on, or underwater, is very much downplayed in our society. I went to the 24th grade. Means I did a lot of graduate school, and I tell my teenage daughters that I went to 24th grade and they think there's something really wrong with me. Overeducated fella. And I never learned about this in school. I'm not sure why, because it is the reason I'm here right now, and it's part of the reason that you're here right now. But we don't talk about it in school. We don't talk about it in grade school. We don't talk about it in high school. We don't talk about it in college, or rarely in grad school. But is fundamentally part of who we are and part of our motivation to take care not only of the natural world, but each other and ourselves. And this idea that water helps us to feel better is incredibly important in 2020 for all kinds of reasons. I won't get into politics, but we're at a kind of a red-minded time politically. People are arguing about a lot of things. Even family members are arguing. We have a 24/7 news cycle that sort of continues to tell us about all the bad news in the world. Our technologies, these supercomputers that we almost have in our pockets all the time and sometimes even sleep right next to them, are increasingly part of that issue. This overconnected, distracted, red-minded existence that we now call normal. I was fortunate to study sea turtles as a graduate student. And I want to say thank you for inviting a sea turtle biologist to speak at Whalefest. I know it was kind of a hard decision, but sometimes turtle biologists slip in and get up to the podium. But this is a sea turtle we tracked back to 1996. And I mentioned Brenda, who's formerly worked for an organization, a company called Telonix. Telonix made a transmitter, the ST6, in fact, that we used on Adelita. We glued it to her shell. It doesn't look so neat right there, but it worked. And that transmitter stayed on her shell. This turtle, Adelita, had been raised in captivity. She had spent 10 years in a tank about a quarter of the size of this room. And so when we released her off the coast of Baja California, our team, kind of a binational US-Mexican team, she swam away from the boat off of Santa Rosa Liita. And when I look at this video, I see a little pause. And the pause occurs right about where she would be saying to herself, and I don't speak turtle, so I'm guessing here, right about there, where's the wall? There should be a wall here. For 10 years, there's been a wall. Every time I've swum this much, there was a wall. So she pauses. Finding no wall, she continues to swim through the imaginary wall. And so this is interesting biologically, but it's one of the most powerful metaphors I've come across in the natural world. This idea of swimming through the walls that hold us back, especially when those walls are invisible or imaginary. So Adelita, this loggerhead sea turtle, 223-pound adult-sized loggerhead, was released, swam off, paused at the imaginary wall, and then kept swimming. On the other side of that imaginary wall was the rest of her life, including an enormous trip that she needed to make to get home. 12,000 kilometers. It took her 368 days. She swam from August 1996 to August 1997. Took her a full year. Back then, the internet was new and young. We put her track on the internet. My advisors said, don't put that data online. And I said, why? And they said, people will steal it, steal the data. And I remember thinking, oh no. And then I remember thinking, what will they do with stolen turtle data? And then I remember thinking, good things, I hope. And it turns out they did. We did not follow that advice. We shared the data in real time, which nobody had done before. This is the first animal of any kind tracked swimming across an ocean. So it really rewrote the oceanographic textbooks. There's a lot to say about loggerheads in the North Pacific, their biology, their threats. I could spend the next week, and I probably wouldn't need to even breathe telling you about turtles. I won't do that to you right now. But I do want to give you the follow-up story. She made it to Japan. Last year, my high school daughter was taking the PSAT, which is the exam you take. It's a practice exam for the SAT if you're thinking about going to college. And the reading comprehension essay on the PSAT exam was not about the science, it was about reading comprehension, was about Adelita. So this turtle has continued to teach kids about our world, continued to inspire through her incredible journey across the biggest, wildest part of our planet, the North Pacific Ocean. So millions of kids tracked Adelita online back in the early days of the internet, partly because there wasn't all that much else to track online, so they found Adelita and they stuck with it, partly because we shared everything. And it inspired people. So if you have been inspired by whales, even though you had never seen a whale in person, you might be inspired by sea turtles, even though you began your inspiration tracking them online through kind of a virtual experience. So photography, science, reading, data, art, music inspires us to care about these animals. The virtual depictions of wildlife are also medicine. In fact, for many, many people, this track maybe introduced them to the ideas. So I alluded to this idea that in our formal training, including our government agencies, our academic institutions, our nonprofits, our schools, our clubs, and I wouldn't put Whalefest on that list because here I am talking about it today. Our businesses, most of our training, most of our institutions, we focus primarily on the ecological, the economic, and the educational benefits of a healthy ocean, of healthy biodiverse ocean, of healthy whale populations, of healthy turtle populations, kelp forests, coral reefs. What's missing from that? The fourth E, I like to call it, emotion. The emotional health benefits of an intact ocean are enormous. Think of it. It gives us hope. It gives us romance. Has anybody ever gone to the edge of the ocean and felt a little bit romantic? Has anybody ever proposed to someone while looking over the ocean? Has anybody had a ceremonial event at the edge of the water? Anybody ever been to a wedding that overlooked the water? Why do we go to the edge of the water? What if that water was dead and stinky and ugly? We wouldn't do that. We go there because it's inspiring. We go there because it puts us into a different state of mind. I'm going to get a little, is anybody recording this? I hope not, because I'm going to get a little personal. My wife will kill me if I, has anybody conceived a child within view of the ocean? Is anybody in the room? I'm not saying that I have twice done that, but, and taken our kids to Big Sur, back to those places where we were. Anyway, you get the idea, right? The ocean, the lakes, the rivers hold a special place in our emotional lives. Has anybody ever gone to the ocean when you were stuck for some reason or stressed for some reason, and it helped you get unstuck or de-stressed? Right? Why don't we talk about this? And you're going to say, oh, because it's not science. That's BS. It's called neuroscience. It's called applied psychology. Look it up. There's a whole department over at Stanford that studies it. There are journals full of it. So we need to connect the dots on this topic and stop pretending that the cognitive, emotional, psychological, social, spiritual, and creative health benefits of our oceans, lakes, rivers, and wildlife are somehow unimportant. Because when you undervalue anyone or anything, bad stuff happens every time. And we have undervalued the ocean, and bad stuff has happened. So bringing the fourth E in is going to build a bigger movement. It's going to build a more diverse movement. It's going to balance that equation that has been unbalanced. It's going to help. I'm not going to say it's the silver bullet solution to all of our woes and it's going to fix everything, but it's going to help. And that's basically the thesis. So I'm going to unpack that a little bit. And so the first thing I want you to do is take out your blue marble and turn to somebody next to you, preferably not the person you came with. So I'm looking over at you guys over there. Don't look the other direction. And turn to somebody near you. Exchange your blue marble. And I want you to just take a minute. So that's about 30 seconds each. And just tell that person, your new friend, about the water you first fell in love with. Now, you might not be able to go all the way back, but pick some water that you fell in love with. And just tell what was the name of the water, where was it, and maybe who introduced you to that water that you fell in love with. So let's just take about a minute and do that, about 30 seconds each, and then I'll tell you when the time's up. So go. Okay, that's about halfway. Make sure you hear from your friend as well as speak to your friend. Join in there. Okay, now start wrapping up your stories. I told you it was going to be a short one there. All right. So this is a really hard question to throw out into a room because it requires more than a minute. If you really wanted to tell that story well, you might want to just take the whole day off and go kind of find a pub and tell that story to each other. But there's that question, what's your water? I asked to a lot of people, and sometimes when I'm traveling. So I'm going to ask if you heard a story, not the one you told, but the one you heard, or even overheard, that you want to share that you thought was interesting. So if that was a micro story, this would be a nano story, really like a really small version of a small story. Yes?
So this couple behind me, they were married on a beach in Hawaii.
Right. Yeah. Why? Why did you choose to be married on a beach? What was the thinking?
Hold it so we can all
Yeah. All right. Microphones. Yes.
It was the ideal spot for us to be married in Hawaii because it was away in paradise. Yeah. And then, of course, in paradise, we wanted to have the ocean be part of our lives. So we were there on the edge, overlooking the ocean.
Right. Makes perfect sense to do that. Yeah, we don't really ask the hard science question like why very often. But it makes perfect sense. The symbolism of being by the water on such an important day, attaching that feeling to that moment, makes it better, right? That's what Blue Mind really is trying to investigate. Any other great story? I'm 100% in it. We were married on the beach in Big Sur, barefoot. It's just kind of slightly stereotypical Californian, but...
Great question. This gentleman lived in the middle of the country in Illinois and Pittsburgh, or Chicago and Pittsburgh, and he met somebody who took him surfing, I think, in Massachusetts. I didn't even know there was surfing. And he fell in love, and he moved here.
Right. There you go. Very good. I went to college in Indiana and learned to scuba dive in a quarry, and the good thing about learning to scuba dive in a quarry is every dive after that is better. It's just like, yes, people have learned to dive in exotic places, and then it's sort of all downhill from there. But so if you're thinking of learning to scuba dive, do it in a quarry. Try it out. Isn't that? Yeah, that's a great. I hear that regularly. People who don't grow up near the ocean, but then meet her for the first time, meet the ocean, and then something goes click, and you go, okay, I want this more, and then maybe it changes your entire life. Your entire life. Pretty amazing. Yeah.
I'll tell my story.
Yeah.
Hold on. My story is that I escaped from Los Angeles. We moved to Pacific Grove. We wanted to be by the ocean. We wanted that atmosphere. And it's added to our longevity because of the atmosphere, the people, and 10 years at the aquarium with my friend here. And it's just a wonderful experience. And a new lifestyle.
Right. Well done. Is anybody else? Yes, another story.
When I was a little girl, can you hear me? Yeah. When I was a little girl, I used to have this dream that there was a kind of a great blue lagoon, and there was flower boxes that had material on them and everything. And then I came to do my student teaching in Carmel, and I was walking to school at River School one day, and I came over a little hill, and down below was a blue lagoon, which of course is where the river comes out into River Beach, and all the flowers were in bloom, and those were the flower boxes that I had a dream about. So I taught here, bought a house here, and my son next to me grew up in the lagoon there and became a marine biologist.
Right. Excellent.
So it was a life, unbelievable.
Yeah, excellent. Well, we're pretty fortunate, anybody who lives in this area and travels or visits this area knows how fortunate we are to kind of live in a place that you also can dream about. Yeah.
I was talking to Terry, and she grew up in the Midwest, and she was talking about how she came to Florida and how it just changed her. And she was thinking about the ocean is not as oceans, but as an ocean that's all interconnected, and how that was, and how in the early years of the aquarium, they dropped the S from oceans and put ocean as part of their thing. So that was really neat.
That's great. Yeah, really good point. Just ocean singular rather than plural, because the interconnectedness. And I tend, as a marine biologist, I also tend to push for more conversations about waters, including our lakes and our rivers, because the lake people get together, the river people get together, the ocean people get together, and they talk about a lot of the same stuff, and it's also connected, because where those lakes and rivers eventually end up in our oceans, but we don't talk to each other. The limnologists and the marine biologists and oceanographers don't hang out that often, but just that the fact that it's all water and it's all connected is worth considering. So I think we could go on for a few more hours with these great stories and maybe even compile them into a small book just from this one session here. And I think it's clear that we each hold a water story and full of emotion, right? Full of romance, full of major dreams and decisions. Our children are affected by our decisions related to our relationship with water, our careers, our hobbies, our wellness and our longevity, our economic health, our emotional health, the ecological health, our educational health, our spiritual health. It's all connected to these decisions around water. But again, we rarely see that dialed into our policy, to our curriculum, and to our conversations for some reason that still doesn't completely make sense to me. And that's kind of what I'm asking you to be the leaders and take these ideas forward in whatever realm that you work in. You know, even if you're retired, you talk to people, you're educators. So just a quick show of hands. How many people would consider themselves scientists in some way or another? Okay, how many people would consider themselves educators in some way or another? Right. How many people would consider themselves artists in some way or another? Okay. How about leaders in some way or another? All right, so here's the kind of the punchline. We're all scientists. We're all artists. We all have creative lives. We're all educators and we're all leaders. The group that we lead may be small. Maybe you and your partner. Sometimes you're the leader. Of course, your family. A club. Could be a bigger group. We're all scientists, whether we realize it or not. We're asking and answering questions throughout our lives, and we're collecting data to solve problems. And we're all creative. We're all artists, right? And we're all out there educating all the time. Every conversation we have where we share something we know that we think is important and transmit it to someone, they understand you're an educator. So let's take these ideas about Blue Mind forward as artists and educators and leaders and scientists. So that is an unfamiliar view for most of us, but Brian Scarry, whose photo that is, I just put that up there because I love looking at it. It always makes me feel good. But every time I share that photo, it gets, even at Whalefest, it gets a little bit of a gasp because it's just that full submergence and being on the whale's terms and that experience of awe and wonder that animals like whales give us. And it's not exclusive to whales, of course. I'm a turtle guy. I'll leave room for them as well, for that awe and wonder. All right? The experience of working on a turtle beach and helping these hatchlings make it to the ocean in places where they need that help is just a great thing to do with your time, whether you're doing it as a professional turtle biologist or as a volunteer or helping out on a project. And there are projects like that all over the world. Those moments of just being one-on-one in the wild, even if the wild is a beach, between some homes in Florida, I just wonder, like that kid, look at that boy. He's not going anywhere. He's just sitting there watching that leatherback do her thing. And I bet he'll never forget that moment. And my guess is that moment is permanently part of his nervous system. And he can rely on that moment when he needs it to be inspired or to feel calm. And perhaps it may have even led him to be a more empathetic human being. Maybe a scientist, maybe a conservationist, maybe a big problem solver, who knows, right? That's not me, by the way. I did love turtles as a kid, but nobody ever took a picture. So red mind is the opposite of blue mind. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about red mind because it kind of takes the mood, makes the mood a little flat. But I just want to say that the American Psychological Association says this past year was the highest level of stress and anxiety they've measured in the United States of America, right? They do an annual report called Stress in America. You can look it up and you can read it. Just trust me, for adults and young people, we're dealing with high levels of anxiety for a multitude of reasons. We're not going to blame just the technology and just the news and the media and the politics and the economy and the this and the that and the environment and climate change, but my opinion is that we don't really need to throw more stress on the pile and hope that it solves our problem in terms of the environment. We need another set of tools. So fear and anger are very useful, extremely useful. Red mind is not entirely a bad thing. It's what gets us out of trouble. It's what you put us on the moon. What helps us reach our deadlines. Healthy competition is good. But if it's all we have, if that level of stress and anxiety is all you have, and that's your main toolbox, is just, okay, work harder, more coffee, less sleep. Guess what happens? Call it gray mind, burnout, breakdown. We've all experienced that in at least a mild form, some of us in a less than mild form. It can feel like depression, mild or severe depression. Gray mind's not useful. In the WHO, the World Health Organization, said that workplace burnout is at an all-time high globally. So we're taking too few vacation days. We're cutting back on our sleep. Most people don't get enough sleep, way under the recommended amount of sleep. We wake up, the first thing we do is we have a quick look at our screen. We think we won't get sucked in, we get sucked in. And then the day is on. It's like kind of a nonstop battle between you and your screens. And if we go on a Friday afternoon after a long week, we gather up our friends and our family. We say, hey, let's go out and get a bite to eat it. Let's call it TGI Fridays. You ever been there? Right. Thank God it's Friday restaurant. You go in, and the only seat available is in the bar where they're playing some music from the 80s that you kind of like, but you kind of don't. And then there's 15 TV screens. And there's 100 people in there, and the menu is enormous, so that's overwhelming. And that is relaxing. That's how we relax, us modern humans. We just double down on red mind to relax. No wonder we're burning out, right? So blue mind to the rescue. Knowing where that off switch is, knowing how to disconnect, knowing that water, nature, wildlife, being outside are one of the best medicines for one of the biggest causes of mortality and illness. 60% of diseases and disorders are related to stress. 60%. This is a public health crisis, right? So understanding that whales and turtles and coral reefs and kelp forests and beaches and redwood forests and wetlands and sloughs and creeks and rivers and lakes are medicine is really important. Needs to be taught K through 12, needs to be taught to all college students, needs to be taught throughout all the educational system. That brings me to this simple question: what if? What if our teachers and parents understood blue mind and shared it as a matter of course, as part of our environmental curriculum, as part of our health curriculum, as part of just the toolkit for being a good human? That if you're feeling a little stressed, find some water. That could be the shower, it could be a bathtub, it could be a pond, it could be a pool, it could be a lake or river or an ocean. It could be virtual water. It could be Blue Planet film. Right? All of it, all of the above. Could be a rainstorm, going out, putting your face to the sky and letting the rain fall on your face. It could be closing your eyes and mindfully thinking about the water you first fell in love with. It might be calling up my brother and saying, hey, John, remember that time we went fishing? Can we just talk about it a little bit? Because it makes me so happy. All of those things, right, help us to calm ourselves down. When we're calm, we're more creative. We're more likely to solve the big problems and come up with novel solutions. We're more likely to collaborate. What if our nurses and doctors and therapists understood this? And in addition to all the great things that they prescribe now, they said, hey, do you have access to a kayak, a surfboard, a pair of goggles? Have you ever thought about scuba lessons? You ever hear of a float spa? You got any of those in your town? Do you have a bathtub? Make use of it. What if your doctor said that? Now, I know a little bit in this part of California, you might say, yes, my caregiver says those things. But I'm going to tell you, most places I travel, most places I go, we're nowhere near our health providers suggesting such California kind of hippy-dippy ideas. Those are things that are starting to catch on, and we have some leaders here with us today who are in fact been leading that charge in sharing these ideas and putting them into action. But we have a lot of progress to make. This young woman in Oakland at a hospital was part of a UCSF study. And so she's using technology. What do you think she's looking at there in that VR headset? Whales. She's swimming with whales and dolphins. And when she was using that virtual whale-dolphin experience, it reduced her pain, which is a big deal. And so if virtual whales and dolphins can help us manage our pain, our red mind, think about what RR, not VR, real reality. You don't hear much talk about RR. You hear a lot of talk about VR in California and Silicon Valley. RR's real reality. Whales and dolphins, turtles and kelp forests can help us manage our pain. Has anybody ever had pain, either physical or psychological or social, spiritual pain, and you went to the ocean, you went to nature, and that pain got smaller? Has anybody ever had that experience? Have you ever seen that happen with someone you love, or a student that you work with, or a friend or a colleague? Right? Let's talk about that like it's real, because it's real. And let's talk about that because it's science, because it's the hardest science in the room, unless we're at an astrophysics conference. And that's a strong number 2. If you're not so interested in the primary literature, okay, if you're interested in the primary literature, go to Google Scholar and look up blue space. And then just sit back, and I apologize in advance, you will lose the next week of your life reading all of the wonderful research. If you're less interested in the primary literature, which can be a little bit clunky and a lot of statistics, some people are into that, here are 3 books. The one I wrote on Blue Mind, which is about water, but my friend Flo Williams wrote a wonderful book called Nature Fix that's about this connection with nature, more broadly. Really a focus on green space. And then Richard Louve's new book, brand new book. He wrote a book called Last Child in the Woods, but he also wrote this book, just came out, how wildlife does this for us and with us, and how important it is to connect with wild nature, with the animals that are out there. Respectfully, appropriately, non-aggressively. I'm not saying, do all those, we know all the rules. If you see a marine mammal, you don't put on the gas and go flying up to it, right? Respectfully, interacting with the wild world around is so important. In person, virtual is good, but the real thing is so much better. I call it wildlife conservation therapy, and it has a sort of the advantage of being not just about us, ourselves, but about them. It moves from a me perspective to a we perspective. Dan Siegel, a neuroscientist, calls it the MWE, new word for you, MWE, if you're looking for a way to talk about yourself and the other. It's kind of funny to say, but if you start saying it, you'll keep saying it. Try it, MWE. It kind of feels good to say. So wildlife conservation therapy is what happens when you go volunteer on a project like Peggy's, and you get out there and you help the team, the pros, get whales disentangled or baby turtles into the ocean, or a whole range of projects you can volunteer and be helpful on. You leave feeling good, maybe relaxed. You helped the animals, you helped nature, you helped yourself, maybe even help the people that were with you for the journey. Groups like Force Blue, they're working with special ops veterans. So men and women who are trained to kind of blow things up or stop things from being blown up or retrieve bodies and body parts on our behalf around the world. They work underwater, but now their skill set is being used as for coral reef restoration in the Florida Keys. Right? Force Blue is just one example of the many nonprofits that are popping up that are putting together this idea of therapy and wildlife conservation, helping people who need it most, first responders, veterans, people who work in emergency rooms, people dealing on the front lines of red mine. Dr. Paul Piff is a good friend and colleague. I call him Dr. Awesome because he studies the science of awe, and he actually likes when I call him Dr. Awesome, so I do it. Might awe cause people to become more invested in the greater good, giving more to charity, volunteering to help people, help others, or doing more to lessen their impact on the environment? Our research would suggest that the answer is yes. If you're interested in the science of awe and wonder as it connects to the environment, look up Paul Piff's work. There's a study from the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology in 2015. But he and his colleagues at UC Berkeley have done a lot of work in this realm. So think about it. If this feeling of awe that we may get from the ocean and from wildlife tips us into a more empathetic and compassionate place, which it does, wow, we need that. Does anybody think we've got enough empathy in the world at this moment, right now where we sit? I think we could use a lot more empathy. I think we're kind of dealing with an empathy crisis, along with some other kinds of crises. And so how do we fix that? Well, part of it is awe and wonder. And the definition of awe and wonder is it makes us rethink our world. And the byproduct of it is it shifts us into a more empathetic place, says the research. So what we're really doing when we create a whale disentanglement project, or an environmental education project, or a sea turtle rescue project, is we're also creating schools of empathy and awe and wonder. That's a different way of describing what you do. But in fact, it is what we do every day, that we teach young people and adults about the wonders of the natural world. That's my daughter, Julia. She's now 15, which, yeah, if you know Julia, you know, I'm not even going to get into it, but she is a good kid. But there she is. She would not let go of that turtle. We pulled that turtle out of a net. We measured it. We took blood samples. We did all the things we do as biologists. And she sat there and held its hand. She said, "Daddy, I'm going to hold the turtle's hand." I said, "Why?" "Because he's sad." You can imagine that you've probably had experience with kids when they're so empathetic. And then the sun went down. It was dark, and we still had work to do with the turtle. She sat there. She's falling asleep. She fell asleep on that turtle, holding its hand. And then we finally got the turtle back into the ocean, tagged it, and released it. We are schools of empathy. That's what we are. That's what we do. The children and the adults that get out there with us and see the whales and the dolphins and the turtles and dive, see the birds, walk the coast, paddle, all of the things we do, hike in the forest, they become more empathetic, and empathy is what we need. So let's not pretend it's the touchy-feely stuff or it's the soft skills, because it's backed by the hardest science. I say that as a guy who went to 24th grade. My PhD is in evolutionary biology. My master's is in economics. And this stuff, this is the hard science. This is the real deal. It's if you're feeling like it's touchy-feely and that's why we don't talk about it, get over it. Dive into the primary literature and then bring it into everything you do. Let's teach all of our kids and all of the adults about their blue mind and how to access it. It will change the equation. It will rebalance the value equation that's out of whack right now. Those experiences with animals like whales move us deeply. They make us unstoppable stewards and sometimes warriors for the blue parts of our blue planet. We are so unstoppable. You know, you can unfund us and you can call us turtle huggers and dolphin kissers and tree huggers or whatever, but we don't stop because we're so in love with the world that we live on and its fellow creatures. So I want you to take your blue marble with you, and it's a gift from us to you just to say thank you for all the work you do. Thank you for being here. Thank you for all of the work you've done. Thank you for all the work that you have ahead, the hard work, the unstoppable efforts you're going to put in over the coming year. It's going to be a weird, hard year. It goes without saying. 2020. Be unstoppable. Use your superpowers of love and gratitude. Keep your blue mind on so that you don't burn out. Please don't burn out. That's not good. There's no reason to burn out. It's not helpful. Step back, disconnect, get in the water, go out and look at some whales, paddle around, go for a swim or a float, get your blue mind back on, then come back creatively and collaboratively and calmly and keep solving the problems that we need to solve. If you're interested in any of this, you can find me very easily. I have some postcards. If you want a copy of my book, they're being sold as a fundraiser for the work here around the corner there. And again, if you want to get in touch and continue the conversation, I really just scratched the surface of many, many subjects. And I love talking about this stuff. I think it's probably obvious by now. So reach out and let's keep the conversation going. So thank you very much for inviting a turtle guy to Whalefest and letting me share some blue marbles. So thank you very much. Do we have time for any questions? Is that, yes, okay. And if you need to peel off and run, feel free to do that. Yeah.
Thank you for the very inspiring talk, for energizing us, for encouraging us. I remembered in 1990 that we had this huge, massive following for Earth Day 20th anniversary. I don't see much for the 50th anniversary. Any feelings why that might be?
Yeah, I have lots of thoughts. I think part of it is because a lot of our messaging has been pretty, catastrophic, guilt and fear laden, mixed with some anger and a lot of factoids. I like factoids. I'm a scientist, but I know that particular mix for most people is a turnoff. And I think let's just go back 50 years. If we were having this conversation 50 years ago and you said, hey, I've got this idea for Earth Day. You go, what's Earth Day? Well, let me tell you about it. And if we had based Earth Day around and stuck with it for 50 years, a real emphasis, not avoiding talking about the problems, but really talking about the beautiful, healthy, wonderful, economically viable, fun solutions that we have, that we can take off the shelf right now, and a vision for a planet where the rivers are able to provide all the economic and the ecological and emotional health benefits. And we didn't let it become so politically divided because we're saying, the ocean is medicine for our veterans and our first responders and our ER docs and nurses. That's a really different vibe than the one that we often get hit with. So that's not the whole answer, and I'm not naive enough. I'm not unaware that the forces that are creating many of the big problems are not that easily sort of distracted. But the big corporations use neuroscience to sell you stuff. It's called neuromarketing. Every Super Bowl ad that you may see next weekend has been through a neuroscience lab. You may or may not know that. When the neuroscientists make suggestions to the marketers, they take them and they adjust those ads to be stickier and emotionally more valent. So they work better, so they sell you more stuff you may not want or need. Then you have brand affiliation. We could do that with the environment in a transparent way. So neuromarketers, there's zero transparency. They don't want you to know they exist. Neuroconservationists like myself, I want you to know every single thing I know, and I wear it on my sleeve, so it's transparent. So that's, if I were designing Earth Day 1, starting now, I would imbue it with more blue mind, with more neuroconservation. I'd make sure part of the message was that a healthy environment is good for the bodies and the minds and the hearts and the souls of the people who need it most and everybody else. I don't hear that message very often. You hear it more often around here in this part of the world, and so our colleagues at the University of Exeter Medical School are really doing great work. But I know that's a longer conversation. That's a quick answer, but hopefully that was helpful in some way. Any other questions? No turtle questions? Are you kidding me? Usually everybody wants to know what happened to Adelita. Yes, Peggy. Oh, my favorite turtle, and this is not a dodge. This is from the heart. My favorite turtle is whatever turtle I am swimming with my daughters, or whatever turtle I'm looking at on a beach with my daughters. It can be big, small, it can be a leatherback or a hawksbill or a green turtle or a black turtle, anywhere in the world. But if I'm there with my girls, I'm getting a little specific, but that's the turtle, not the species. Really, truly, that's how people say, what's your favorite aquatic activity? It's whatever I'm doing with Grace and Julia. Falling off a surfboard or free diving or just walking on the beach, swimming laps. That's about where my head is right now because they're getting older and they're taking off soon. So I'm holding on, maybe a little too tight. Sorry, I shared a little too much there, but. Yeah, oh yeah, sure. Yep.
From a volunteer perspective, and talking about turtles again, because I love turtles, if you were to, where would there be the greatest need for volunteers to go do some turtle work?
Yeah, we started a project 10 years ago called Sea Turtles, SEE, turtles.org. My colleague Brad Nahill runs it, based in Portland, Oregon. And the goal of that project was to answer that question. So we pulled together projects where there's a lot of conservation need, where a volunteer could be really helpful and really beneficial to the project. So that would be a place to start. So trips that we put together. And so we go to places where there's a real need and where there's a real impact of bringing a group in versus. And there are lots of places where there's a lot of visitors and there's a lot of volunteerism. We tend to go to the ones where we can make the most impact. Yeah, that's a quick answer. Yeah. Right. Thank you. I'll be